William George Heirens was born in Evanston, Illinois, into a poverty-stricken home to George and Margaret Heirens, but grew up in Lincolnwood, a suburb of Chicago, on the eve of the Great Depression in 1928. His parents had been in the floral business, but lost it due to the state of the economy. As an escape, young William Heirens took to wandering the streets in the search of entertainment, which often came in the form of petty theft. While working at a grocery store at the age of 12, Heirens accidentally shortchanged himself with a customer. To make up for it, he stole a $1 bill from an apartment by reaching through the crack in a chain door. From there, he graduated to stealing larger sums and later personal items. At 13 years old, he was arrested for carrying a loaded gun. A subsequent search of the home discovered a number of stolen weapons hidden in an unused storage shed on the roof of a nearby building, along with furs, suits, cameras, radios, and jewelry he had stolen. William admitted to 11 burglaries and was sent to Gibbold School for Wayward Boys for several months. William was reportedly a loner and enjoyed playing with his technical things, such as chemistry sets and toy airplanes, and also liked drawing and repairing old clocks. William was again arrested for burglary. This time, he was sentenced to 3 years at the St. Bede Academy, operated by Benedictine monks. During his time at school, he stood out as an exceptional student, and his test scores were so high he was urged to apply for the University of Chicago's Special Learning Program. He was accepted into the program just before his release, and asked to begin classes in 1945 fall term, allowing him to bypass high school. He was 16 years old and was hoping to become an electrical engineer. During his first years, things went very well, even though his parents could afford the tuition fees for the dorm fees, forcing him to do part-time work at night as well as doing burglaries for money. He eventually started stealing war bonds as well. During the second year, his grades started slipping due to dating and spending less time doing homework. However, not even advanced courses, involvement in extracurricular activities, rising popularity over a string of girlfriends could supposedly stop William Heirens from reverting to his childhood hobby and eventually evolve into something far more sinister. In 1945, when William was 17, the lipstick killer murders began. In June 1945, 43-year-old Josephine Ross was found dead in an apartment in Edgewater, Chicago. She had been repeatedly stabbed and her head was wrapped in a dress. She was presumed to have surprised an intruder who then killed her. Dark hairs were found clutched in Ross' hand, indicating that she had struggled with the intruder before she was killed. No valuables were taken from the apartment. Police interviewed her fiancé and several ex-boyfriends, all of whom had alibis. As there had been no suspicious characters reported at the scene, no witnesses and no noise disturbances reported, it seemed for the time being that the Ross murder would go unsolved. That is, until 6 months later, when William Heirens committed his second murder, the one that would become the hot topic of Chicago and kick the police investigation into high gear. In December of the same year, 32-year-old Frances Brown, a divorced woman, was discovered with a knife lodged in her neck and bullet wound to the head in her apartment in Edgewater, Chicago, after a cleaning woman heard a radio playing loudly and noted Brown's partly open door. Brown had been savagely stabbed, and authorities thought that a burglar had been discovered or interrupted. Also, like the Ross murder, there was a startling lack of evidence. In the apartment, the police had found no fingerprints, no evidence of a burglary, and no hint of who the murderer could have been. No valuables were taken, but someone had written a message with Brown's own lipstick on the wall of Brown's apartment. "For heaven's sake, catch me before I kill more, I cannot control myself." Immediately, the media picked up the case and splashed across the front page, branding the culprit as the lipstick killer. Of course, thus far, the lipstick killer was nameless, an unidentified man or woman, as the police once insisted, on a silent rampage through the streets of Chicago. For just short of 1 month, the city was held in a sensationalized state of terror, egged on by the Chicago newspapers, which waited with bated breath for the next horrific crime scene to be discovered. Within the first week of 1946, it finally came, when William Heirens, still an unknown and unsuspected, committed his final crime. Heirens' third murder was without a doubt the most brutal. In January 1947, the final victim was found. She was a 6-year-old Suzanne Degnan, who was discovered missing from her first-floor bedroom in Edgewater, Chicago. After searching the apartment and not finding the girl, her family called the police. Her disappearance earned significant publicity, and police vowed to find whoever was responsible. The police found a ladder outside the girl's window and also discovered a ransom note which had been overlooked by the family. One of the few pieces of evidence linking William to the first 2 murders was a bloody fingerprint smudge found on the door jamb on the entrance door. It was compared to his prints and eventually was declared not a match. Around 7 p.m. that evening, Suzanne's severed head was found floating in a sewer near her Degnan home. The ribbons that had been tied in her hair that morning were still in place. Before long, her legs and torso were also discovered in nearby sewer basins. Once again, Chicago was caught up in a horrific but captivating crime, though the police had yet to officially connect it to the murders of the lipstick killer. The public waited to see who would be arrested, but it would be almost 6 months before a likely arrest came. Heirens was in the midst of a budding romance with a classmate whom he planned to take on a date night. He just needed some extra cash. He originally planned to cash a savings bond for $1,000 at the post office. Unfortunately, the post office was closed when he arrived. This was no issue to Heirens, as it had become second nature to him. Heirens reached into an open apartment door in the same upscale neighborhood where Suzanne Degnan once lived. But a tenant of the apartment spotted him. As Heirens fled, he was followed by 2 policemen. Cornered, he pulled a gun from the back of his jeans, one he claimed to have packed in a case he was mugged while carrying the bond, and turned it on to the officers. Discrepancies have been found between William Heirens' account of his arrest and that of 2 officers. Heirens was transported to the hospital wing of the Cook County Jail. There he was subject to a torturous interrogation, through which he slipped in and out of consciousness due to pain, drugs, and exhaustion. After naming him as the suspected lipstick killer, the police searched Heirens' room at the university, his parents' home, and a locker he kept at a local train station. In the locker, they found evidence of his lifetime hobby of thievery, and after taking his fingerprints discovered that they were a 9-point match to those found on Degnan ransom note, a fact that it would later be disputed. Despite these facts, William Heirens did not confess to any of the 3 murders, much to the police's dismay. In an effort to get him to admit to at least one of them, police enlisted the help of several nurses and 1 doctor and reverted to the sinister methods. Several days into his interrogation, which involved physical torture, 1 doctor even injected Heirens with sodium pentanol, known to the layman as a truth serum, though it did nothing more than put him in a state of semi-conscious delirium. After 4 torturous days, Heirens eventually began to mutter the beginnings of a confession. While under the influence of the sodium pentanol solution, hovering somewhere between excruciating pain and unconsciousness, Heirens spoke of a man named George who could potentially have committed the murders. Police searched for George and questioned Heirens' friends and family, but ultimately came up empty-handed. But the fact that Heirens' middle name was George ultimately led police to believe the statement to be somewhat of a confession to being the lipstick killer. Despite the fact that William Heirens' handwriting did not match the note left on Prentice Brown's wall, and the fact that police only had 9 of the FBI required 12 points of identification necessary to deem fingerprints as a 100% match, and the fact that Heirens' confession was disputed by several nurses, police ultimately charged William Heirens as the lipstick killer. On July 12, 1946, 17 days after his arrest, Heirens was indicted with intent to kill, robbery, 23 counts of burglary, and 3 counts of murder. Despite the fact that the interrogation was clearly botched, not to mention that all of his places of residences and his locker had been searched without a warrant, Heirens agreed to a full trial even though he risked being sent to the electric chair. The thing is, once you're dead, there's no clearing things up, he said, looking back at his arrest in a 2008 interview. When you're alive, you still have a chance to prove that you weren't guilty, so I was better off being alive than being dead. Ultimately, after the state's attorney offered him a deal of 3 consecutive life sentences, Heirens pled guilty to all 3 murder charges. Later he would recall that he only did so because he feared for his life and was afraid for what would happen should he turn down the deal. His decision may have saved him from the electric chair, but it ended up costing him the rest of his life. For the next 65 years, William Heirens would be incarcerated and face a maximum security lifestyle. In 1972, he became the first prisoner in the history of Illinois to earn a BA degree. He also took up several trades and helped several inmates get their GEDs. The lipstick killer would attempt suicide 3 times. William spent the last years of his life incarcerated in hospital ward of the Dixon Correctional Center minimum security prison, suffered from diabetes, and was confined to a wheelchair. Heirens would maintain his innocence up until the day he died at age 83. When he died, he was Chicago's longest-serving criminal.